Hell's Kitchen had seen everything. At least, that's what the regulars liked to say. The neighborhood, wedged between the Hudson River and the blinding lights of Midtown Manhattan, had survived gang wars, blackouts, fires, riots, and waves of gentrification that tried to scrub its rough edges clean. It had been loud, dangerous, hungry, proud, and unbreakable. People who lived there wore its reputation like armor. So when the first scream tore through West 46th Street at exactly 6:42 p.m., nobody panicked. At first, the air was thick with summer heat and the smell of fried food drifting out of corner delis. Taxi horns argued with delivery trucks. Fire escapes rattled as someone climbed down to smoke. The sidewalks were crowded with theater-goers, construction workers clocking out, and locals who knew how to move fast and mind their business. Inside Rocco's Diner, a narrow, stubbornly old-school spot that refused to modernize, the dinner rush was just beginning. Rocco himself, 62 years old, barrel-chested, with hands permanently stained by grease and espresso, stood behind the counter yelling orders like a general in a war he'd been fighting his whole life. 2 meatloaf. 1 tuna melt. Who ordered pancakes at night? What is this, a crime? Behind him, Lena Morales, a waitress who had worked the diner for 11 years, balanced 3 plates on one arm like it was nothing. She'd seen drunks, fights, walkouts, and once a man try to pay with subway tokens. Nothing surprised her anymore. That confidence would not last the night. At 6:45 p.m., the bell above the diner door rang. Everyone felt it before they noticed it. The man who stepped inside didn't fit Hell's Kitchen. He was tall, thin, dressed too neatly, gray coat, clean shoes, hair slicked back like he was headed to a business meeting instead of a greasy diner. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes darted around the room like he was searching for something or someone. Lena noticed his hands first. They were shaking. She walked over anyway because that was her job. "Sit anywhere," she said, already reaching for menus. The man slid into a booth near the window, but didn't touch the menu. He stared straight ahead, breathing too fast. "You okay, honey?" Lena asked. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Then, very quietly, he whispered, "I think someone's going to die." Lena froze. In Hell's Kitchen, people joked about death all the time. This wasn't a joke. "Sir," she said carefully, "are you hurt?" He shook his head. "They're here," he said. "They followed me." "Who followed you?" His eyes snapped to the window. That's when the scream outside hit. The scream was sharp and desperate, pure terror cutting through traffic noise like a blade. Everything stopped. Cabs slammed brakes. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the neon signs buzzing above the street seemed to flicker. Lena ran to the window. Across the street, near the entrance to an apartment building, a woman had collapsed onto the sidewalk. She was clutching her chest, gasping. Her grocery bag spilled open beside her. Cans rolled into the gutter. People stared. Nobody moved. That was Hell's Kitchen's unspoken rule. Don't get involved unless you have to. But the man in the booth shot to his feet. "That's her," he said, panic cracking his voice. "That's who they want." Before Lena could stop him, he bolted out the door. "Hey!" Rocco shouted. "You can't just—" The door slammed shut. Lena didn't think. She followed him. The woman was in her late 50s, hair pulled back, face drenched in sweat. Her lips were turning blue. "I can't," she wheezed. "I can't breathe." Lena knelt beside her, heart pounding. "Someone call 911, she yelled. Nobody moved. Phones were out, but pointed at the scene, not dialing. The man in the gray coat knelt down, hands shaking harder now. "Ma'am," he said urgently, "listen to me. Did you take anything? Any pills?" The woman's eyes fluttered. They told me it was medicine," she whispered. "Said it would help my heart." The man's face drained of color. "Oh God," he murmured. "They used you." Lena looked up at him. "Who is they?" she demanded. He didn't answer. The woman convulsed. That was when someone finally screamed, "Call 911." And this time, Hell's Kitchen listened. At 6:49 p.m., A 911 operator in Manhattan answered a call that would later be played in courtrooms, newsrooms, and police training seminars. 911, what's your emergency? There's a woman collapsing on the sidewalk. Hell's Kitchen, West 46th and 9th. She's not breathing right. Is she conscious? Barely. What happened? A pause. A man's voice cut in, urgent and shaking. She's been poisoned. The line went quiet. Sir, the operator said slowly. How do you know that? Because it was meant for me. The sirens arrived fast. NYPD cruisers, an ambulance, unmarked cars that locals recognized instantly as not normal. By the time EMTs lifted the woman onto a stretcher, the street was sealed off. Police tape snapped in the heat. Officers pushed the crowd back. Lena stood frozen, hands covered in sweat that wasn't hers. The man in the gray coat was surrounded by officers now. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the moment was finally crushing him. Rocco had come outside, apron still on. What the hell happened? He muttered. Before Lena could answer, two men in dark suits approached. Ma'am, one said to her, flashing a badge too fast to read. We need you to tell us exactly what you heard. Lena swallowed. She had lived in Hell's Kitchen long enough to know that when men like that showed up, things were never simple. Inside the back of a police van, the man finally talked. His name was Evan Keller. He had been an accountant. Boring. Invisible. Until 6 months earlier, when he stumbled across financial records that didn't make sense, charities that weren't charities, medical grants funding something far darker. He thought he was exposing fraud. What he actually found was a human testing operation. Illegal drugs. Human trials. People paid to distribute medication to vulnerable patients. Evan tried to report it. They tried to kill him. Tonight, they slipped poison into a bottle meant for him. The woman on the sidewalk had picked it up by mistake. She saved my life, Evan said, voice breaking. And now she's dying because of me. The officer across from him didn't look away. She's alive, he said. For now. Word spread fast. By 7:30 p.m., Hell's Kitchen wasn't loud anymore. People stood in clusters, whispering. Diner doors stayed open, but nobody ate. Sirens echoed up and down 9th Avenue. The woman, Maria Alvarez, a retired seamstress, known by half the block, was in critical condition at Mount Sinai. And Hell's Kitchen waited. Lena sat on the diner steps, shaking. Rocco handed her a coffee she didn't remember asking for. You okay? He asked gruffly. She nodded, then shook her head. I don't know, she said honestly. I think something bad is coming. Rocco looked down the street, where police lights painted the buildings red and blue. Something bad's already here, he said. Question is whether it leaves. At 8:12 p.m., a black SUV tried to push through the police barricade. That was the second 911 call. Shots were fired. People screamed and ran. Officers returned fire. The SUV crashed into a lamppost, smoke pouring from the hood. Inside were two men with unregistered weapons and fake IDs. The story broke wide open. By midnight, federal agents had raided 3 locations across the city. Files were seized. Names were exposed. And Hell's Kitchen, tough, scarred and stubborn, had become the epicenter of something much bigger than itself. The next morning, sunlight crept into the streets like it was unsure whether it was welcome. News vans lined the block. Reporters talked fast and loud. Headlines flashed on phones. Poison plot foiled in Hell's Kitchen. Good Samaritan fights for life. Lena stood outside Rocco's diner, watching the city pretend everything was normal again. Maria was still alive. Barely. Evan Keller was in protective custody. And Hell's Kitchen had done something it almost never did. It had cared. 3 days later, Lena visited the hospital. Maria's eyes were open, weak but alive. They say you saved me, Maria whispered. Lena shook her head. No, she said softly. You saved all of us. Maria smiled faintly. Figures, she said. I always liked this neighborhood. Hell's Kitchen had always been painted as dangerous, ruthless, uncaring. But the truth, the real truth, was different. That night, when a scream cut through the noise, people froze. But then they called. They stayed. They helped. They broke their own rules. Because even in a place built on survival, there are moments when humanity takes over. That's why, on one unforgettable night, Hell's Kitchen had to call 911. And why the city would never forget it.